And thanks very much indeed for joining us. I suppose Swiss banks have got a bad rap in relation to the Libor scandal, and the one front and centre is UBS. What's changed?
What's changed in the inquiries and investigations? This is what we did. I think what's changed is that we've learned two things. The first one, we went very quickly with FCA into the facts. And there, after 2 months, and no more than that, what we learned was a general thing for risk management in the industry. So what we did, and that's the good thing, we had a sort of general communication to all banks, which is on our website, where we said, okay, look, we've seen that this control was here, this was not here, but all formal controls were in place, but were not exercised in the right way. We found also wrong incentives. So what we did was to force all the other banks or brokers to go into their job, into their offices, and see if they had these problems. And then they should give us a report with an auditor's help. So that's the first lessons learned. It was not only UBS which had controls problem, probably only UBS in Libor, but in other investment and things like that, and that's what we did. And we did it with rogue traders too. So trying to educate, but also to supervise if the education had some effects.
And what was the underpinning reason, do you think, for these failure of the control systems? Why did they not work?
Probably because of cultural reasons. People trading were probably doing business as usual in their view. Therefore, the controller or people who should have controlled them had never ideas even that something was wrong. That was a sort of general cultural thing. And also the organization of the Libor was as such a problem. I had one of my sons who studies economic history, and he called me one day and said, okay, I'm writing something on Libor. Do I understand that it's a private thing? And I said, well, okay, you've understood. So that probably was normal for everybody, even for regulators, for supervisors. So the controls were not deemed that important.
And yet, at the same time, the manipulation that we've seen of Libor and associated benchmarks occurred after the major banks had been bailed out because of mismanagement at the beginning of the global financial crisis. So there's almost a sense that the banks learned nothing.
Well, do you think other people learn anything? I don't think banks have learned much, but I think other participants in the markets haven't learned anything.
And why is that?
Probably because something we can deal with, which is the incentive misalignment. There we should and could and have done something, probably not enough. The second reason is, I think it goes back to people, meaning you're greedy, your people are greedy, and also cultural reasons. It's normal, it's practice, and like many other people, bankers live together, like lawyers do, and they have a sort of internal culture which is different.
And so is there a responsibility then for regulators to attempt explicitly to regulate culture, to change that culture?
Well, we've tried, but with tools which are probably adequate to formally regulate it, meaning giving people the obligation to explain what they do, how they do it, and why they do it. But to basically change their mind, I mean, just can't do it. So you can put into place mechanisms which may reduce the temptation to not to cheat, but to get more or to go outside the ethical and moral rules.
So ultimately then, what you're suggesting is perhaps if we think that formal rules will be enough, you're suggesting that formal rules simply won't be enough, they'll be transacted around.
They're not enough, I agree. They'll be transacted around what you can do as supervisor, because I mean, we do a few rules, but that's not the main thing you can do. Then you have to be more intrusive in your supervision, meaning you have to go on or send people in, for example, audit firms, to check what is really done. It's difficult. You have then to be critical to the answers you receive and to discuss it with people. And we're training as supervisors our people to do that and not to be just satisfied by the answers they get.
And do the regulators themselves have to change their cultural underpinnings?
Oh, I think so too. I mean, we've to be more conscious of what we do and to be conscious of what our strategy is. And I've been chair of FINMA for 4 years now, but before I was in the banking commission, which was only a banking supervisor. And I think we've changed much as supervisors and as head bodies of these supervising authorities, because we had to become more clear on our objectives. And once you're clear on your objectives or strategy, then you find ways of really doing it, and then you have to supervise that you've done it right.
And so, in your view then, with that experience, both as a banking and as a market conduct regulator, I mean, do you think that one can rely on stated assertions of change by the industry, or does it have to be externally validated?
I think most of it has to be externally validated, and not only once. You have to follow it.
Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.